Well, as Brad mentioned, I have the great honor of spending a moment with a dear friend out of the Minneapolis, Minnesota area, Jeff Grinnell. And Jeff, just want you to know how much I love you, I'm for you, and excited about this conversation today. So thanks for giving us a little bit of time today.
Of course, Steve. Thank you. It's a privilege, and one of my favorite things to do is to talk to youth ministry people who are doing the same thing that I love because we get it. So
Yeah, it's good stuff. Well, Jeff, I know you through the Assemblies world and through North Central, but if you wouldn't mind, give the audience just a little bit of background on who you are, what the Lord has brought you through in the previous years, and that'll set us up for today's conversation.
yeah, great. Thank you again. And there's so many ways to go with what we're going to talk about today. Let me begin with maybe my family background. Raised in the church, basically, and served the Lord. I was pretty faithful until my junior year of high school, and in my sophomore year, junior of high school, that whole year where, I was struggling with my faith like many are today. And we hear that, and, man, that's a whole nother topic, but
Right.
yeah,
Right.
yeah. And one of the things that really brought me back to my faith was difficulty. I remember thinking, even as a teenager, wow, God is great when things are going well, but life sucks right now. Life is really bad. And that kind of, I dropped my faith in that moment. And to be honest, it was almost like a perfect setup because I had only known good things, man. In my family my parents had good jobs. I was always, a big man on campus, played 3 sports, conference in 2. So it was like the setup was great, and then things started falling apart and I got into drugs big time. And I remember even saying a little prayer, like, God, take this away or whatever, right? And deliver me from this. And when that didn't happen, I started questioning my faith. And so I left home, left the church, ran away from home, just that kind of stuff. And it was those kind of things that actually strengthened my faith. So I was never afraid of that. And, we're going to talk about some of that currently in my life now too. But so came back to Christ my senior year of high school and went just all in. Witnessed, was an evangelist in my school. So involved in the youth group, and my faith became my faith. It wasn't my youth pastor's faith.
Yeah.
It wasn't. It wasn't my best friend's faith. It wasn't my family's faith. It became so real to me. It wasn't popular faith. It wasn't faith like so many people today, Steve. Their faith is in social media. Their faith is in another preacher or listening to podcasts. It became my faith my senior year, and I was never the same again. I never did drugs again. I never swore again. All the stuff that came with those parties never happened again. And I go off to school and I meet the love of my life. Like my first weekend of school, man, I'm like with my buddy that we went to school together with. I'm like, dude, I am not dating my whole first year. Right? My whole first year, I'm just going after God. It's just me and God. And he's like, yeah, man, let's change the world, right? And I am not kidding you. You can read it in the book that I'll reference later. But the first weekend of school, I meet this girl. And I told him, I'm like, I'm going to marry that girl. And he's like, hold on, what did we just talk about? Right? And
Nice.
exactly, like 2 nights ago, what did we just talk about? And I remember thinking, yeah, I made that commitment. Maybe she'll just still be around, or whatever. Well, the next weekend, I invite her to church. We go to church, and the rest, we dated ever since, man. And take it like 31 years later, all this time in youth ministry, 3 kids. I have a 31-year-old, 28-year-old, 25-year-old now, 4 grandkids, and 2 of my kids are in youth ministry, and the third one is studying for young adult Gen Z ministry, Gen X, maybe Gen X, Gen Z, depends here. So it's really cool to have the whole family in ministry. And then about 4 years ago, it'll be 4 years ago this Christmas. Some know my story. I know you do. My wife passed away, and that made everything. I had to ask myself again, like I did when I was in high school. I had to ask myself again: is this for real? Is everything that I have lived for real? Because to be honest, Steve, probably like most of us, I really had never known hardship, not living in America, and I know, listen, I get it. Everybody has their problems. But when your wife gets cancer and at literally, it's a long story, but at my daughter's wedding, she got sick. And at the end of that day, she was not sick the day before. We're in perfect health, riding our bikes, playing tennis, having a blast. We're in perfect health. And we go to our daughter's wedding. And by the end of the day, I take her to emergency. She's there in ICU for 28 days from the night of my daughter's wedding, 28 straight days. And they tell us Jane has 2 months to live, like stage 4 metastatic melanoma. And what do? It's not like we didn't have time to prepare. And I mean, we had only known blessing. We'd only known, great kids. At this point, both of our 2 oldest are now in youth ministry. And it's like, okay, here we go. And so what we did is we did everything that we believed for everyone else. Now we had to believe it for ourselves. Because when other people came to us with those stories, we, like you do, man, and like this incredible First Priority staff that's listening has done, you go into ministry mode. When somebody comes to you, right, and they say, hey, this is what we're going through. And so what I did is I went into ministry mode with us. I brought the kids around and I said, this is our story now. This is not somebody else's story. We're not believing for somebody else. This is our story. And I'm telling you, the same thing happened, Steve, as I referenced when I was in high school. The faith became my faith. This became Jane's faith. This became Jaren's faith, my oldest, and Jory, my middle, and Justin, my youngest. This wasn't a game we were playing.
Yeah.
This was for real. This is for real. And I think one of the lessons, let me extend that just for 1 minute. I just posted on this yesterday. All of these people that are struggling in falling away from their faith, I don't know any of them. I knew of them, but a common factor that I see often in these things, and I don't know these 2 people that are a little more popular well enough, but I will say this. If we have not gone through the testing of our faith, it is much easier to fall away from our faith. But when we have gone through the testing of our faith and we found it to be true, as Paul said, I'm telling you, there's nothing that can shake it. My faith, like these 2 incredible people that had served God before who are so popular in the news now, my faith was similar to theirs. But I'll tell you one thing, my faith was personal too. It was not Hillsong's faith, or it was not, the Baptist faith. It wasn't a Pentecostal faith. It was my biblical faith and my personal relationship with Jesus Christ. And I have been in as many personal moments in my worship as I have been in public moments of my worship. And I will choose and you know this, I will choose my personal, private moments in worship with God over those public moments that were in stadiums with thousands of people. So that's what made me. What made me is not my invitations to go speak at youth conventions and my schedule of traveling all over. That doesn't make me. What makes me is my privacy and my spiritual formation in my own personal discipline. So,
Yeah, to piggyback on that just a little bit. So interesting enough, this is minor compared to what you're talking about, but it's a nuisance in terms of what we do for ministry.
Right.
You may have or have not seen, we did a weekend of prayer here in Tennessee 2 weeks ago over all the students in Tennessee, and we went campus to campus.
I love that.
And so, in order to get more people involved, because we are all full and busy in what we do, we went online and we did some social media live stuff where I would go to a campus, or a group of us would go to a campus, and we'd pray. And on day one, at the very end of the day, after about a dozen of those, I got a anonymous text from someone
right,
who quoted scripture and basically reminded me that the Lord said to pray in private. When he taught on the Lord's Prayer, don't be like the Pharisees and the scribes and pray in public so that everyone can see you.
I've heard it too.
And so I got that, and I was like, oh man. And I had this moment of, here I've done become a Pharisee, right? I've messed it up. And then the Lord reminded me, as you just said, no, you're out here trying to increase awareness so that people will join you in prayer.
That's it.
And what that person doesn't understand is that you've already had time with me. You and I have already had the private discussions that prepared you for not only the words, but the process of walking this out.
Yeah.
And so it's so interesting that the way that you frame that I'd trade in a minute any public forum for what my time with what I have personally with the Lord.
Steve, that's so good, because two of the greatest moments of my life in Christianity were when nobody else was around.
That's right.
When my faith was the first one was when I was in college, sophomore year, and I had committed every Friday night from my sophomore year through my senior year to spend it with God. A friend challenged me with it, and to be honest, it's what shaped my ministry. But every Friday night, when everybody else was going out to football games and basketball games and roller skating or movies or whatever,
nice.
I stayed in.
Nice.
Yeah, I stayed in. And Friday nights I was alone. I wasn't with Jane, none of that stuff. And so what happened was, I'm all alone in my dorm room. And the presence of God came over me while I was listening to worship, like never in my life before. And then skip forward to when Jane passed, December 18, 2015. And I walked out. I kissed her. She passed in our bed that night. I walk out of the room into my prayer chair, and I never saw her again. I kissed her goodbye, and I turned on my Bluetooth. Before I called the kids, I turned on my Bluetooth and I worshiped for the next few minutes. And I'm telling you, his presence was unlike. You've been in the conventions. I've heard the greatest worship teams on this planet.
Yeah.
And I've never, until way back in college in my dorm room, had a moment like that. And I have other moments like that personally. Yesterday I did in my apartment here in Minneapolis. But those two were special, man. I'm telling you. So I'm not dependent on outward or outside influences to get me to worship God or to be a believer. I've seen Him in the intimate moments, and that just makes who we are in those public moments.
Well, one of the beautiful things about your story is that it has allowed your why to be very clear, right? You know your why.
For sure.
It radically transformed your own life. It radically created a foundation, a cornerstone for you to return to often as you faced moments, big or small, throughout raising your kids and then being adults. So let's talk about what it is that God has you doing right now with youth ministry across the country, and just where he's taken you over the last few years as you've used this story and been kind enough to the public to allow us to walk this story out with you. You know, what is God doing with you right now?
Yeah, that's why it was so easy to say hello to this podcast, because I love everything about First Priority, and you know my history, but maybe some of the leaders don't. I've worked with First Priority when I was a youth pastor in Michigan, and I have been around the whole First Priority movement as I travel and do youth ministry coaching. So what you're doing is very close to my heart. Basically, what I've done is youth ministry now for 35 years, 19 years as a youth pastor in the local church, and then 10 years of teaching at the university level here in Minneapolis, and then about 6 years traveling. So what I did the year before Jane was diagnosed, actually about 6 months before she was diagnosed, so in 2015 early, we started an organization called Youthology, and basically the study of youth, because I was getting so much interest outside of teaching. You know, people who are like, hey, would you come and do this? Would you come and do that? And I'm like, yeah, but you know, I'm limited. I can't, I'm gonna be gone so much, and you know how that is. You got a job. And so what happened is I stepped out of teaching and went full time into this Youthology. And basically what I do, about 75% of what I do, is go into churches and spend 3-4 days with their youth staff, volunteer included. You guys know that 80%, the statistics are, and I have them coming out in my book. I've posted these, but the statistics are real. 78 to 82% of youth ministry in America is run by volunteers. Only about 20% of churches in America have a paid youth pastor. And so I thought, if I'm going to raise the level of youth ministry in America, I've got to reach the volunteer. And so what I do now, about 75% of what I do is go in and work with these teams. And I'm in the urban, suburban, and rural setting. I'm in the small, medium, and large church. And I love what I'm doing, because basically I go in and I look at systems, and I look, you know, I mean, I'll do 2 full days with the youth pastor and their staff, talking about what they're doing well, what they're not doing well. It's quality control, man, in youth ministry. And I send them a 46-point evaluation ahead of time. They do a self-evaluation, and then I do an evaluation once I'm there. So it's the best of both worlds, man. And then the other 25% of what I do is this. From September to May, I have my own blog that goes weekly, and I podcast that also. And then youth events for leadership training, for conventions, for youth summits. I've got at least every month I'm doing a youth leadership training thing somewhere. So it now is full time for me, where I'm just now teaching part time. I just teach on Tuesday. I just teach one class at the university here in Minneapolis now. So I'm in the field a lot more than the classroom.
So let's jump on in the field for a moment, if you don't mind opening up your book a little bit. So
yeah.
Knowing that your story, in the way that Christ has met you in so many different moments in your life, as you are entering into these youth ministries, what do you see, or what are a few things that you're seeing that would be helpful to these folks that are, they're volunteers, they're on a volunteer level on a campus on a regular basis, but they're also youth staff where they're working at a church? What are some things that you see that would be helpful to them?
Good, love it. So one of the things that I love to talk about are trends in youth ministry. And let me pull out there are so many of them. I think I have 5 in my new book that's coming out. We'll talk about at the end of the cast here. But one of those trends in youth ministry is hardship, crisis, whether that's the school shootings, whether that is at-risk behaviors like cutting, bullying, drug and alcohol abuse. And I know that drug and alcohol abuse has gone down in Gen Z, but where we do see it, it has gotten worse. Actually, in some ways, it's gotten broader with vaping, and it'll be interesting to see the statistics come out now, since vaping is so much newer. But one of the things that I've seen in youth ministry increase big time is crisis. And so, having gone through it myself, I feel like, I had the right words to say to students before when they came to me and said, hey, I've lost a parent, or I've lost a grandparent, or my best friend committed suicide, or my mom is in the hospital and she has cancer, right? We've all heard those stories. And I've said the same things. I've had the right words to say, and I said them I've said those things before with heart and with meaning and with intention. But Steve, when you've gone through it, I don't know, man. Empathy takes over, and I thought I had empathy before because I would cry with kids before, but now I'll grab them and I'll say, "Listen to me," and I know what you're going through. Not like I've said that before, right? But now I know what you're going through, and I would share them. If they hadn't heard my story, I would share, and now we're both crying. And now I can tell them, listen, would you call? Like I've said to so many teenagers, would you call my kids? My kids are so good with that. They'll DM other kids that I'll say, hey, follow this kid and DM them. They want to talk to you because they've gone through what we've gone through. And it's so amazing to turn around, what the enemy meant for evil, however you want to say that. I don't believe it was the enemy's hand in our situation at all. But sickness, is certainly not of the kingdom, but it wasn't a direct curse. We weren't under a curse, or we weren't under an attack or whatever. My wife got sick. That'd be a whole nother discussion. But anyway, so to be able to just talk to these students and help them through, now that I've gone through it, is like really special. It is really special. So, but when you ask the question, what do I see in the field and in youth ministry? I see a lot of hurt, man. A lot of, the racism and the diversity issue. As much as we see it in the adults, and as much as the racism that we see that's tearing apart our country, I see as much gracism in our young people. Like I've said this so many times, I see more gracism in the younger set than I see racism. I see more racism in the older set than I see gracism. Yeah. Talk to our kids. They're playing on the same teams. They're going to the same church. They're hanging out together. They're dating each other in a cross cultural way, in an intergenerational way, like we've not seen before. Man, our young people are so comfortable with diversity. So I do see that tension and some of those things going on. But I'll tell you, when you've gone through it yourself, it is easier to help others go through it, for sure.
One of the interesting things about that, Jeff, is that, the only way to go through those things is to live time. And a lot of the youth pastors or youth ministers that I run into are fairly new. They're, it's not that they are unseasoned, but they just haven't lived a lot of life yet.
Right.
And one of the lessons that I've learned from a guy named Mark Roberts, who is on our staff, is Mark will often allow me to use his stories when I'm out speaking. I will say to Mark, hey, you've got a great story here. Do you mind if I use it? And the same goes for youth ministry. We don't know what we don't know, but that's not an excuse not to minister to a student who's dealing with cutting, right?
So
just because you haven't cut doesn't mean that you don't go find ways to understand what a cutter is feeling, right? And just because you didn't use meth as a kid doesn't mean that you don't go find ways to understand what a meth head is thinking when they're killing themselves slowly.
Well, remember too, what you're saying, Steve, this is so good, because when people want to change, right? and when they want help with those things, they don't go to somebody necessarily who's on meth. A cutter doesn't run to a cutter and say, help me, necessarily, right? So we don't have to have gone through those things. What they're looking for is somebody that can help them, maybe that's not doing it or has had victory over it. The same grace that he saved me with, I use to minister to other people, So I totally agree with that.
I love the idea of being able to connect to your story and how gracious, again, you were to allow a bunch of us in the midst of that short period of time with your goodbye with your bride, and allowing us to be able to say, hey, you're right, I haven't walked through a very short moment like that, but I have a connection. I know as somebody. And that's given me moments to have empathy beyond what I would know if I hadn't gone looking for those things. And I think it's true across the board with the crises that we're facing right now.
Yes. As a matter of fact, one of the things that I've learned going through this is I'm not the only one. And I think sometimes, Steve, we can think, man, everything's falling apart. What am I going to do? God, how could you do this, right? To me. And I think we forget that Job before us and Paul before us, etc. We could go on and on and on through church history and those that have gone before us, or just read Hebrews 11. And we're not alone. And so one thing that I would just encourage the staff, the FP staff, and all of us, maybe we have friends who are going through something, is that there is a university of help around us if we'll take advantage of it. There are so many people that have gone through something, and it's a phone call away, it's a click away, it's an email away, it's hey, let's go out and get a donut away. It's so close. There's a university of help around us if we'll look.
So good. Well, we could go deep into the crises moment, and you've obviously been with some of the first party teams as they walk through that.
Part 2 coming up.
I think where I'd like to land this plane today, if you're willing, Jeff, is just there are so many discussions yet to come that our staff team, the volunteers that are on campus that are going to face. How do they further connect with you and Youthology so that if they want to have a greater discussion, if they want to find some help in some areas, they can actually connect with you? How do they do that?
I love that. Thank you for even bringing that up, because I'm here for leaders. I'm a leader of leaders. So, I love teenagers. I like leaders. That's what I like to say. But I'm here for them. And please, if they're sitting in this, if they're listening to this podcast and they want to reach out, that's why you brought me on. So all they got to do is go to youthology.com, YTHOLOGY, so it's short for youth. That's kind of the pop acronym right now. Youthology.com. There's a connect page. Send me an email, or call me. My phone number's on there also. They can connect with resources there. I have a resource page that says help, from the 800 suicide hotline number that's there, to My Broken Palace, to Teen Challenge, to all kinds of stuff. Human trafficking. I got links on there for immediate help. Or they could make a phone call to me and say, I listen to your podcast. I get this all the time. In my podcast, I post this all the time. I was just in a podcast in North Texas with about 200 youth leaders, and I got 2 DMs. No, I got 2 phone calls and several DMs after that when I say things like this. So I will get you back. Connect with me, please. I'm here to help with ministry resources, family resources, personal resources, your kids. I love PKs, preachers' kids, credentialed kids, however you want to say it, missionary kids. Whatever I can do to help, that's how they can get a hold of me. They can get the book there. The book that we alluded to, that I wrote on hardship. It is the story of our loss of Jane. It's called hashtag If Job Had Twitter. And what would, in other words, I wrote it for millennials and Gen Z. What would Job say if he had social media today? You know,
Yeah.
and every chapter is a tweet, and I kind of walk off on that a little bit. And then my new book comes out in October. I just sent the edits in this week, actually.
Awesome.
And it's a youth ministry book. It's a life book. I had already been working on it, but put it aside the last few years to write the other one, and to be honest, to just heal from that. And I've drawn on that experience big time in this. So it's a 2-volume book. It's called Youthology, the Study of Youth. The first book 1 comes out here this fall. The second book 2 comes out in the spring. So I'm almost done with book 2, but book 1 will be out shortly. And it is the history, theology, and a call for an awakening in youth ministry. Book 1 is. And then the second book is all pracs, youth ministry meetings, campus access. You'll love this crowd will love a double chapter on campus access, you know, and I talk about the parachurch organizations and what the relationship of the church between that. So anyway, the second book is a real practical book, but that'll be out in the spring. So that's how they can connect with us at Youthology.
It's awesome. Well, Jeff, you're a breath of fresh air. You're a cold drink of water, and so very, very grateful.
Thank you.
To you for your time, for your thoughts. Again, just breaking off a piece of your life and being willing to share it with us. And just want to say thanks, man. Thanks for starting the conversation, and I have no doubt you'll get some responses from our folks. And
Great.
we want to have further discussion. Okay, man?
Awesome. Can't wait to get to Nashville, see the crew there. Whenever I get a chance, and I'm there, I will let you know.
Sounds great, buddy. Same to you in Minneapolis. We'll talk soon, Jeff.
See you, my friend.